you very much for joining us. I can see that we have quite a few people flooding through the virtual doors. Thank you again for giving up the next hour or so of your evening to find out more about the State Significant Development application that Frasers is currently working on. My name is Callie Brown, and we'll start the session in just a moment. We've got quite a few people that have registered for tonight's session. So we'll just wait just one more minute for everyone to arrive. Thank you very much for being so punctual, and I will make sure that you don't have to wait too long before we start the session. As I said, we had quite a few people registered, and it's just wonderful to know that there's so much interest in the community in relation to the State Significant Development application that is currently being worked on. I'll just wait another 30 seconds or so, and then we will start the session in earnest. Yeah, it looks like everyone that's coming down to a trickle, all the people who are walking through the virtual doors. So let's start. Good evening, and thank you for joining us for this information session on Frasers Property Australia's State Significant Development application for Ed.Square Town Centre West, Northwest Lot. As I said earlier, my name is Callie Brown, and I'm from a communications and engagement firm called WSP, and it's my pleasure to be facilitating this evening's webinar on behalf of Frasers. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we are all gathered tonight, including the traditional owners of the lands on which Ed.Square is located, and they are the Cabrogal clan of the Darug Nation. I would like to pay my respects to First Nations elders, past, present, and emerging, and extend that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people joining the webinar this evening. Tonight, you will hear from the Frasers team about their proposed State Significant Development application for the site. We are joined by Matthew Van Ryswyk, who is the Ed.Square Development Director. Matt, would you like to give us a wave? The Senior Development Manager, Thomas Rethati, and from Tewa Architecture, we have Tom Rubinark. Also joining us from Schools Infrastructure New South Wales, we have Danny Vetkowski. As I mentioned earlier, we will have a presentation and that will outline the elements of the development application. That should only take 20 minutes or so. And at the end of the presentation, we will spend the remaining time that we have of the hour answering any questions that you have. How do you ask a question? What you do is at the very bottom of your screen, there is a little tool, like it just says Q&A. Then what you do is you click on that tool and you type your questions in, and they come through and I make them public, and everyone will be able to see the questions as they come through, and as they're answered, I will clear the questions away. If you haven't used this function before, please feel free just to click on it now and just type in a hello or the street that you live on, and that will just give you a bit of confidence for later on when we do come to the question and answer section of the webinar. I really do encourage you to type your questions. Even though we're not going to answer the questions during the presentation, I really encourage you to type the questions as they come to you. And it gives the team a bit of a sense of what you're interested in, and then we'll be able to devote the rest of the session to answering your questions. So enough from me. I would now like to welcome Matt Van Ryswyk to start with the presentation. Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, Callie, and thank you everybody for giving up your time this evening to hear about our proposal for Ed.Square for the Town Centre West Northwest lot, which is a proposed high school. I'll start with just giving you a summary of the Ed.Square vision for those of you who are not familiar with our overall development. So this is a 3D view of the overall master plan. You can see the orange railway line at the northern end of the site with the train station logo. And centred around the train station is our town centre. And you can see with the sort of lower level roof area, that's the town centre east, which is the operational retail centre and the apartments above. To the west of that is our town centre west future stage. And in pink there is the potential Edmondson Park High School, which is the subject of the state significant DA that we're here to talk about tonight. Getting your bearings across the rest of the site, you can see the Edmondson Regional Park off to the western side of the site. And then in the foreground, there's various townhomes and parks that make up the rest of the Ed.Square vision. Moving on to the next slide, the Ed.Square journey so far. So this is the same information from the master plan on the previous slide, with a recent aerial photograph overlaid on top. You can see here that the town centre east, which is operational, the town centre west in pink, which is we're here to talk about the northern part of that town centre west, which is the school site, the regional park, the station, and then the commuter car park just to the north of town centre west. And then just a bit of history about Fraser's involvement on the site. So we were announced as the successful tenderer by Landcom in 2015. The first apartment residents moved into town centre east in August 2020, and the first townhome residents moved in to Residential Precinct 1 in March 2021, and of course the Ed.Square Town Square and Retail Stage 1 opened in April 2021. In terms of what's planned and what's in the future for Ed.Square, we've worked really hard to create a really vibrant community, a vibrant town square, and you can see here the photos of the town square and Eat Street. And what we're looking to do is to expand that offering with Town Centre West, bringing that community plaza and extending it forward towards the Edmondson Regional Park. And as part of our vision, we saw an opportunity to include a high school as part of Town Centre West. And we see the high school to potentially really form part of that community, to contribute to the community and to also inform the community. In terms of integrating a high school into Ed.Square, we think that it really help strengthen and grow the Ed.Square community and the wider community. And we're really enthusiastic about some high quality public spaces that could be provided and the infrastructure and facilities that go with a high school in this location. In terms of what that means for current and future families in Ed.Square, we're excited about obviously the educational opportunities, but also the long-term investment in the local economy and with that employment opportunities that come with it. I might just hand over now to my colleague Thomas Rathati, who's going to talk about some of the planning context and the history in terms of Town Centre West and the school site. Thomas.
Thanks, Matt. So as some of you are probably already aware, there is an approved master plan which covers all of the development in the entire Edmondson Park South Precinct, of which the Fraser site is a component. And last year we held some community consultation, which hopefully some of you were at and can remember. And basically that was about a modification of that master plan. So the modification that we were preparing then was to update the master plan basically to include the school usage within the town centre site, as well as community facilities, as well as the relocation of some of our residential product within our own site just to accommodate the school building. So that modification is still with the Department of Planning for approval, but we're now looking ahead to the next steps, which is to prepare a detailed state significant development application, which would seek approval of the school building in and of itself. I might pass over now to Danny, just to give you a little bit of an overview from the Department of Education.
And before you answer, before you launch into your slide, Danny, can we just make sure that everyone's speaking really clearly? Thomas, I could absolutely hear you, but I think at least one of our participants couldn't hear you. So Danny, if you could just make sure you speak into the microphone, that would be great. Thank you very much.
Good evening, everyone. As the team said, my name is Danny. I am from the Department of Education. I just wanted to join today to provide a bit of a snapshot of what the department is doing at Edmondson Park and our involvement in the proposal that you're seeing here today. Hopefully many of you know that the Department of Education is planning a new public high school in Edmondson Park. And funding to deliver that school has been committed in the 2021-22 New South Wales budget. As with all of our new school projects, the department needs to undertake a planning process, which includes developing a business case. And the business case always considers a range of options. So it could be a number of different sites and different types of schools that we may build or other interventions that we may do. And that business case is submitted for consideration and approval. So for Edmondson Park, we are still undertaking that planning process. We're considering potential locations and delivery options, and the business case will put forward the one that we believe will best meet the needs of the local community and provide the best outcomes for the community and the state. So as part of this process, the department has released what's called a request for proposals. And that is to identify any potential private sector partners who may be in a position to deliver a school, a public high school, in maybe an integrated development, as you're seeing here today. So this is one option that the department is considering as part of its business case. So I think there's a question already in the comments about the land that the department owns. This is next to the current primary school that we're building that should be finished in the coming months. So we do own that land and we will retain that site. And that is obviously one option to build a high school. But as part of this planning process that we're undertaking, we are considering the proposal that you're seeing here today from Fraser's as one of the options that we will consider. So I think that might give you a bit of a snapshot. I'm sure there might be some other questions later on, which I will attempt to answer. I'm not part of the project team that sits for the Edmondson Park High School project. I am separate to that, so I may be limited into how much I can answer, but I will definitely do my best to try to do that. And the reason why the project team is not here today is because of the request for proposals process that I mentioned, to ensure that we have that impartiality for the separation from that team and Fraser's during that process. I think that's it from me for now, and I'll hand over to Tom.
Thanks, Danny. Good evening, everyone. And yes, I'm Tom Rubenak from Tarawa. We're the architects working with Fraser's on the proposal for the high school within the Edmondson Park town centre. So this slide, just to start, is sort of an overview of the benefits that were considered in locating the school within the town centre. Obviously, one of the key ones is the proximity to the train station and the bus interchange to the north, and the easy walking distance through to the school site. Another one is this, the use of Henderson Lane, which sits between our site and the commuter car park to the north, which you're probably familiar with. That allows for priority drop-off directly to the front door of the school, and deliveries and loading that aren't in, that sort of keep clear than Sargent Street and the center of the town square there. Another one is the adjacency to the regional park and the benefits and potential use of that area by a school for sort of passive play in certain areas and in the outdoor learning environments that might be facilitated in that area. Another benefit that the scheme enabled was the extension of the existing town square east. Its width all the way through to the west to McDonald Road and connecting into that regional park. And then obviously the location of the high school within the town centre obviously provides great visibility and a real civic presence for the school and its visibility from McDonald Road. On this slide here, we just zoom in a little bit on and outline on the ground floor plane the site structures proposed. At ground level, there is a mix of two uses proposed in this area. So the school entry, basically the school front door and the admin, with the bulk of the school program sitting above on that level 1 and above. And then a selection of specialty retail tenancies that they sort of extend the grain of Eat Street that's already established and sort of front that extension of the Town Square West that I was referring to there. So you can see in the diagram, Henderson Lane enabling that drop off between the school front door and the commuter car park, and then that direct link back up north towards the train station and the bus stops there. And then that Town Square access running all the way through to the regional park. There's also another entrance proposed to the existing basement car park that's already established under Town Square East, which is proposed to be extended across through under Town Square West. Here we just give a sort of snapshot overview of the project as it's currently proposed. It's as you can see in the image there, a school tower sitting on a quite generous podium area of sort of a terracing outdoor play space that incorporates sports courts and a lot of landscaped areas for outdoor passive and active play at lunchtime for students. So it is a mixed use development. As I said, there's a level of a retail proposed at ground level within the school, a dedicated use of school from level 1 up, and it is proposed as a 10-story development. The project has been designed with a capacity as a high school for 2,040 students across the 10 floors. And obviously we're looking at a number of school facilities in there. It has been designed to align with the Department of Education's educational facilities and guidelines in terms of the high school curriculum. So a number of key facilities in there that include the indoor multi-purpose sports hall, which has a competition size basketball netball court. There's another one of those on the podium at level 1 there, as you can see in the image. And then additional outdoor and passive and active play spaces. There's an auditorium, a lecture theatre space, and then a number of the specialist spaces that the school require as well in terms of wooden metal workshops, art studios. There's a food technologies unit within the school, fitness lab for PE, and then computer and science labs, as well as the school library. And the way the scheme's been developed is to integrate itself within the town centre to enable and maximise potential for community use of school facilities. So there's a key connection point here from the level 1 podium down into that extended Town Square West. The intention being that outside of school hours, there's that potential for community to engage with the school and use some of those facilities that we've talked about. So this slide here is just a perspective sort of render of the approach to the school front door from the train station to the north. So walking down Sargent Street towards the town square with the existing Town Centre East retail on the left-hand side of the image. And in the middle there, you can see the entry forecourt there with the school front door, and directly above the indoor sports hall with the basketball and netball court facility. And then the commuter car park on the right-hand edge of the image there. And then this image is from the town square, the new proposed Town Square West, looking back north towards the school building. You can see the podium edge there. And then that stair connection I referred to before that connects that level 1 podium outdoor play space directly back down to the new Town Square West. And then in the center there of the image, that's that internal link that was showed in the site plan, heading back to the school front door, and then that connection back up to the train station and the bus stops to the north. This is a plan of the level 1 slab of the school proposal. So from the west moving east, again, that's that proposed landscape zone at the base of a large amphitheatre there that enables students to gather. The outdoor sports court again, with that ideal of community integration and that use of these facilities outside of school hours. Some additional covered outdoor play spaces, and then that connection through linking to the indoor basketball netball court and change room facilities and storage to enable alternative uses, and that sort of use outside of school hours that we were talking about. So that's just one of the levels of open space within the school. The scheme on the school site itself aligns to the open space requirements or guidelines from the department on a high school and what an urban school model should provide. And then there are, as we go to the next slide, a number of additional opportunities we've looked at in terms of enhancing that open space quality, providing additional open space for students to use. There's the town square that we talked about directly adjacent to the school site that provides a great opportunity for additional open space that's connecting it directly into the school. And then a signalized crossing proposed at the end of that town square, crossing McDonald Road, to enable use of areas within the regional park, and then also a connection to the Zouch Road playing fields further to the west, all within an easy walking distance of that school site. The proposed town park to the east is also another opportunity that we're looking to explore. So a number of additional sites in walking distance from the school that enable potential of school use as well within certain times. I might at this point hand back to Thomas to talk through the next steps.
Thanks, Tom. So just talking through, I guess, the key milestones and where we're up to in this process. The first step on this slide, the section 75W, is the modification to the master plan that I was speaking about earlier. So we have lodged that back in the last quarter of 2021 last year. Where we're at now is that second step. So we are currently in our community engagement phase on our current plans for the proposal. And we are looking to move towards a lodgement of the state significant development application, hopefully before the end of 2022. And then obviously subject to approvals, we would look to move towards construction, hopefully before the end of next year, 2023. And then looking towards a school opening in the 2026 school year. I think that's it for me. Callie, I think I'll hand back to you.
Yes, it certainly is. It's actually over to our participants, because now we're going to devote the rest of the time we have together, so the next 35 minutes or so, to answering the questions that have come through. We've got some really lively and really interesting and very valuable questions and feedback that's come through. And I would just like to reiterate for everyone this is your opportunity. You've got the project team here. No question is too small, too big. There is no such thing as a silly question. Please send your questions and comments through. As we mentioned earlier, we will do our absolute best to answer all the questions that have come through. If the team is unsure about an answer, it's most important thing is for you to receive accurate information. If we can't provide an answer to you tonight, what we'll do is we'll take a question on notice, and we will go away and find the answer, and then we will distribute the answer to everyone who's joining us this evening. So it won't just go to the person who has answered the question, asked the question. It'll go to absolutely everyone. So Matt, I'll ask the first question to you, but before I go ask the first question, there are a couple of just comments. I'd just like to acknowledge some comments that have come through that don't necessarily need any answers. As with all communities, there's a diversity of views, and we've got absolutely both ends of the spectrum. So we've got a comment about liking the proposal. We've got a comment about disliking the proposal. So that's really reflective of every single community session I've ever run. But please continue in with your questions, your comments, your thoughts. Matt, there's a couple of questions here, and I'll ask them together. The first one is, what is in it for Frasers to include a high school in Ed.Square Town Centre? And then if you could answer what how the process would work with the government including the ownership for the proposal of the school site. Would you be selling land to the government? Would you be leasing it? Would the school lease the buildings? Like, could you, I know there would be commercial in confidence, but there's a sense that there is a lot of this work is happening behind closed doors. So if you can be as open and transparent as you possibly can be about the process, about what's in it for you, and then how the process would work going through. Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, Kelly. Yeah, in terms of what's in it for Frasers, we see this as an opportunity to complete our town centre and to really complement what we've already started to create in the town centre. I mean, we all see there's an ideology of a high school being a great, community member to the collection of buildings that we've already got there. And look, to be open, there's also a commercial transaction attached to that, and Frasers, we are a developer, and there's commerce that goes with that. In terms of the structure with School Infrastructure New South Wales, in terms of a sale or a lease, we're still in a tender process, and that, I mean, as Danny mentioned earlier, there's a whole assessment phase to occur. The current thinking is that it would be a long-term lease, but that's not yet anything that's necessarily locked in. I think that the main part is that we're submitting a proposal for a high school, and we'd really like that as a use in our town centre, and we're in discussions in a tender forum with the Department of Education to achieve that.
Great, thank you very much, Matt. Danny, on behalf of Schools Infrastructure, the next question for you, and really in a snapshot, it is if, and it is a big if, the high school does go ahead within Ed.Square Town Centre, then what will happen with that land that you are also looking at as part of the business case, and where will the influence be in the future of that parcel of land, if you're able to answer that question?
Yeah, look, I think with most questions tonight, I'll do my best, and I'm probably limited to how much I can answer, but that site is owned by the Department of Education, and it will remain that way. So the department across the state owns lots of different parcels of land, and often they are retained for potential future educational purposes. So that may be the case for this one as well. If we were to proceed with the proposal that you're seeing today, we will still retain that site for future educational purposes. It allows us some flexibility with things like the primary school, if that needed to expand. There could be other uses as well in early childhood education. And, as I think another comment made, it's a growing community. There may be needs for additional primary schools, high schools. It could be a range of different things. So at this point, there's no intention to do anything else with that land. We would retain it.
Great, thank you very much, Danny. Matt, another question to you, and I suppose this really just goes to the heart of why you think it's appropriate for a high school to be located right in the centre of a retail district, and what you think the benefits are, and also, just to tease out a little bit about the space available to the school and the impacts that retail, or actually the relationship between school students and retail.
Okay, there's a few components there. I'll start with the first part of the question, which was why are we proposing to co-locate a school next to retail? I think to zoom out a little bit first, before we're co-locating with retail, we're co-locating in a town centre. So, and the first premise there is the train station. So the idea of having students and staff being able to get to and from school by public transport, that's a really big plus, not just for the students, but also for their parents. And there's a lot of efficiencies and independence that comes with that. So I think that's the first step. It's not just the fact that it's near retail, it's near a town centre. In terms of co-locating near the retail, look, I think there's probably different opinions around whether that's a positive or a negative thing. I think from a student perspective, it's certainly a positive. And certainly a community vibrancy and activity. Look, there's all sorts of benefits there. Are you able to remind me of the last part of the question?
And what about the space available to kids? Because the sense was that the space next door, like the other space next to the primary school, is larger, and it also picks up on another question that's there, which is, what's the contingency? You know, if the school, we all know that lots of schools are growing and populations are growing. You've got a specific amount of land there. You don't have any additional land for demountables. So what would your contingency be if the school population grew?
In terms of the space available, it's a vertical high school model. So it is a slightly different format to the traditional, greenfield school that most people, perhaps most of the attendees tonight, would be most familiar with. But the vertical school model is, quite proven overseas, and there's been some successful examples in Sydney. In terms of expansion and the ability to accommodate growing needs, look, I guess that probably is one of the constraints of a vertical school. There is some flexibility within the design itself, but it doesn't lend itself to demountables. I'm not really across how that would be progressed over time, but I agree it would be a constraint. But that may well be a good thing, because I don't think long-term accommodation in demountables is necessarily an outcome that the community want to see.
Great, thank you very much, Matt, for that very open answer. Danny,
Danny,
yeah, sure.
So look, this is not an uncommon situation, particularly in the southwest of Sydney and the northwest of Sydney and other parts of growing areas of the state. Demountables aren't the only solution. They are one intervention that we use across the state. And ideally they are a short-term measure. We often and almost regularly change intake areas to balance enrolment at schools. So while one community is growing, a neighbouring community could actually be, the school age population could be decreasing. And so some other schools in the local area could be, underutilised, for example. So over time, we will change intake areas. I think a lot of people call them catchment boundaries. And so the enrolments over time can be managed. So we would monitor the enrolments at this particular school and make adjustments in advance of it being, at that capacity of the 2,000. But I think there's another question there as well around, will it be a selective school? Yeah, and yes, hopefully you've also heard that the government has committed funding towards delivering a selective high school in southwest Sydney. That's a separate school to the Edmondson Park High School commitment. So the location of that school is still being determined. There's lots of site assessments going on at the moment. But I guess what that shows is that there are a number of options, and there's obviously other schools in the wider area. Typically for high schools, the catchment area can be quite large, and a number of different primary schools might feed into one high school. So that's common across the state, and that's why they also have usually they have a larger capacity at that particular school. So the southwest Sydney is growing, that's very obvious, and there are plans to ensure that the demand is met over the coming years.
One last question, Danny, before I go to Thomas Rathiti. There's a question here about the catchment. Do you know yet, it's another couple of years away, what the catchment will be?
No, it's typically fun. So we use population data, so enrolment forecasts and population data, and you want to ensure that you're using the most recent, so closer to any school being finished. So we've got a range of schools that are under construction at the moment across the state, and if they are due to open for the start of a school year, it is usually around 6 months before that we will determine the intake area, because we want to make sure that it's as accurate as possible, and that's when the community would be invited to enrol in that school. So it's something that we look at regularly, but we would determine it close to the school being finished.
Great, that's a fantastic. Thank you very much, Danny, for that very precise answer. Thomas Rathiti, now some concerns about school safety and vandalism and schools not being accessible after hours. How would you maintain safety with the school and the retail, considering they're going to be co-located?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think absolutely the children's safety is paramount, and that's come through in all of the requirements that we've been addressing from school infrastructure as part of our design process. Absolutely, we've spoken a lot about the shared use opportunities and the community having access to some of the school facilities. That would only happen outside of school hours. So during school hours, the school would be a secure facility which is exclusively for the use of the students. The real shared use opportunities that we're talking about are after school hours and on weekends. And that's where we believe the real benefit is in placing the school in the town centre. And Matt was talking to some of these benefits earlier, but the opportunity to open some of those spaces up outside of school hours to allow the use of those facilities by a wider range of the local community is a real benefit that we see in the proposal.
Great, thanks, Thomas. Now, Tom, over to you. I think you may be, if you're not the most appropriate person, just let us know. But a couple of questions here about traffic congestion for drop-off and pick-up. How much increase in traffic to the area has been forecast, particularly like in the area, although that you've got the dedicated drop-off for Henderson Lane, there's a lot of traffic congestion, as the team would be very aware of. There's a lot of traffic congestion around Soldiers Parade and General Boulevard. So how, what are your forecasts for this, the impact that this proposal would have on the traffic congestion in the area?
Yeah, thanks, Kelly. And I'll premise it by saying I'm not a traffic engineer. So, but we are working very closely with our team, traffic consultant, ASON, and they've done a lot of modelling already on this scheme and will continue to do it. As Danny said, that the catchment for this school is still yet to be refined, but there's been some work done already, even in the Section 75W process that Thomas referred to enable the school within the master plan. There was some modelling done about traffic and the mixed mode of arrival and departure to and from the school. The advice from the traffic consultants to date is that the portion of sort of drop off to the front door of school will be sort of quite modest in terms of the overall student cohort, and that the leaning on the public transport and the walkability and cyclability that's enabled by this Ed.Square precinct is really what's driving this. So yes, lots of work to do still in the detailed design of this, but it is a key consideration as we keep going.
And I would just like to acknowledge that there's been a request about the turning lanes as well. So tonight we're taking all of the feedback, and the team is going to be looking at all of the information that's come through to us. So another question for you, Danny, and you may not be able to answer this due to your role, but is this kind of vertical high school, is it seen as a cost savings? Is that why you enter into this kind of model? And then taking into consideration that the Arthur Phillip High School at Parramatta, it is alleged here was over budget, and due to its complexity and delay with construction issues, and I dare say it was one of the first. So is this about cost savings, I suppose is the actual question?
No, what we're trying to do is assess a number of options and to try to find the best outcome for the community and for the state. So cost will definitely be a consideration, as it is with all of our school projects, because we can build schools in a number of different ways or deliver interventions in a number of different ways. So cost is always going to be a consideration. But really, this is of interest because it offers an alternative delivery model. It offers the ability for the private sector to deliver the school, for the department to then run the school. So it will be run as any other public New South Wales high school is run, with department staff and the same structure. What we're looking for, is it going to provide the best outcome in comparison to other options that we're looking at the moment? And I've mentioned the traditional model up the road on the land that we currently own. So it will look at the process that the team will look at. And again, I'm not close to it, so I don't have any of the details, but they will look at a range of the things that you guys are asking tonight, and that the team is talking about as well, including what is the best outcome for this community. Transport, accessibility, there's definitely some benefits there with being so close to the train station, for example. You know, we see the vertical school approach, if you want to call it that. The benefit there is being integrated with the community. So this new community that's being developed, the school can be at the centre of that community. I think there's been a little bit of talk about the use of spaces. Shared use is something that the department is really committed to. Across the state, we're opening up our play spaces more and more to the community to use. We want to make sure that it's not just sitting there on the weekends or after school hours, empty. We want to make sure that we can benefit for the whole community. So we consider that these types of proposals may provide some of those benefits. So it's a range of things that they'll be looking at, I think, and a determination will be made based on the best outcomes.
Wonderful. Thanks, Danny. Tom, a very practical question for you. How are 2,000 plus students going to be circulating through the school? And the multiple stories? Are they going to have to walk 10 stories up, or are there going to be lifts, or is it going to be a mixture of both?
Thanks, Kelly. I saw that question in the chat. I'll take that one. Look, there's obviously still a lot of detailed design to go through, but we have already started working quite closely with pedestrian and vertical transport consultants in terms of pedestrian movement congestion points within the school. The scheme is designed to sort of separate out and be timetabled so that there's a sort of senior portion of the school and a junior portion of the school with the specialist spaces in the middle. But overall, the stair widths and the lifts, the number of lifts, are all being modeled to ensure that is an efficient model. We can sort of compare it as well to the sort of greenfield site with a school distributed across a number of buildings where there's still quite a bit of movement between classes. So this, in the way, it's all in one building. So there is an efficiency there. We just need to work through those congestion points, which we're doing in detail now.
Great, thanks, Tom. Thomas, across to you. Could you just go through again with the open space, and how will the open space going to be accommodated within the regional park when it's quite heavily vegetated? Are you planning on removing any trees in that space?
No, so the proposal for the regional park really is about tree protection. That regional park at the moment is still in the ownership of Landcom. They will be handing over the park to the New South Wales National Parks and Wildlife Service. We have spoken to them about their plans for the site. They are in control of that site. It's not for us to make any decisions or make any calls about what happens in that park. But certainly what they've told us today is they intend on at least maintaining the same number of trees that are in that park at the moment, and utilising any sort of existing clearings where they can provide some small sort of community facilities within there, and obviously some walking tracks through as well.
Okay, look, a question for you, Matt. And it is there have been quite a few comments around recently about a number of issues. And earlier on, we were talking about Tom was talking about the traffic studies. Have any traffic studies been undertaken, and are you able to provide a bit of a snapshot of what they told you? Is that something you need to take on notice?
I would need to. I'll talk about it in global terms, and I'm not sure whether Thomas is able to fill in some more colour, but there might be also some we have to come back with. But it's fair to say that the original master plan already anticipated a use in that part of the site and had some traffic contribution from that part of the site. So when you incorporate the school, obviously you're changing, the time of day and the type of traffic flows that you introduce, but it's not 100% new traffic. So it's about how that proposal stitches into the initial assumptions of traffic, and then there's some road changes that are part of this proposal that can further alleviate traffic pressures. But I'm not across the actual data. I don't know, Thomas, if you're able to sort of colour that a bit better.
Yeah, I can give a little bit more colour to that. So yes, we have started doing some early traffic engineering studies of the surrounding area. I think what's important to note about the local road network at the moment is the local road network isn't yet complete. And so there are some, we're aware that there are some stresses on particular General Boulevard and Solgus Parade, which I think we mentioned before. The current McDonald Road does not connect all the way through around to the north of the train station, which it will do. Those are works to come, which will be completed by others within the next year or two, and that will have a significant impact on the forecast traffic volumes around the area. The existing studies that we have done do talk, in particular, it's the morning peak that is more of a concern than the afternoon peak, because obviously the afternoon peak for a school is different to the typical evening peak for every other sort of use of motorist. So the morning peak is where they are similar, and so that's in particular what we've been looking at. So there are basically what we've found to date is that we should be able to accommodate this use with some minor tweaks to the current road network and the provisions within the current roads. As Matt was saying, McDonald Road has been planned for much heavier usage, which is not being utilised at the moment, and mainly because that connection isn't in place.
Okay, great. So I would just like to point out to everyone that there have been a lot of questions and a lot of comments that have come through, which is absolutely fantastic. All of the team can see the questions as you all are, as you all can. I'm going to prioritise. I've got an eye on time. I'm going to prioritise the questions, and then I'll read out the comments later on, because there are a lot of kind of comments and opinions, which is fantastic. But I'll prioritise the questions. A question for you, Danny, about what evidence has been looked at and supports a project like an urban school from a Department of Education standpoint. For example, schools being located next to retail, close to strangers, heavy traffic areas, and the thought processes in managing these variables.
I think I don't have any, evidence in front of me to talk to. I think what we can all see across the state is all of our schools are generally located in the centre of a community. So I understand this is a slightly more, different modern approach, but my kids' public school is in the middle of our suburb, in the kind of retail precinct, if you want to call it that. So I don't see it really any different to that. We're all part of the local community, and I think that's probably the biggest focus for the department in considering this proposal, is that we see it as an opportunity for the school to be central to that community. There's potentially a lot of other benefits there, and we've talked about transport being one of them. And these are high school students. We do have a lot of schools that we've recently built in more built up areas as well, and a range of different styles, and some of them have been more of the vertical school style. So we've got Inner Sydney High School. I think somebody's mentioned Arthur Phillip. There's a precinct in Meadowbank that we've recently completed. These are all schools that have multiple levels. All of our schools need to meet modern standards and be accessible. So having lifts, for example, is something that all of our schools have these days. and they will be operated in a way that all of our other schools will be operated as well. So being in the centre of the community is what's valuable to us, but obviously that's just one consideration that will be taken into account over the coming months. Like we said, there's a range of things that will be considered as part of this proposal, and we will consider that in comparison to other options as well.
Okay, thanks, Danny. Matt, I think that it's really worthwhile. There's been a bit of chatter in the papers, and there was something raised in Parliament in regards to urban schools and access to fast food or open space. And I suppose let's just ask a really blunt question here. And will students potentially have just as much access to fast foods as much as they would to open space?
Thanks, Kelly, I think. Look, it's a good question, and I suppose that's the most negative way you could look at what we're proposing here. So what our vision for the Ed Park High School, proposed Ed Park High School, has always been that it be really integrated and knitted into the community. And as part of that proposal, we have some retail on the ground floor of the school. And our intent is really around the integration of the school with the community, which, we've talked about the benefits for both the school and the community with that integration. We've also heard some of the negative aspects of how retail fits with a school. As we started some community consultation last week, and there's been some and part of this consultation forum is to hear about what people really think about what we're proposing here. And we're not here to sell you our pitch. We want to listen to the feedback, and we have taken it on board, and we're sort of considering how we could solve that differently, how we could integrate the school with the town centre in the same way, with the same level of integration, but with a slightly different outcome, perhaps. So that's possibly the retail part of the question answered. In terms of open space, look, that's again quite a complicated one. What we do know about high school students is they're not, and I think there's some research behind this, but they're typically not using playing fields in a passive way. It's more that the fields are obviously important, but they're used for specific active play. And what the Department of Education's vertical schools draft guideline identifies is that access to playing fields is more important than having a playing field as such. And that's what this proposal utilises. So there are some playing fields at Zouch Road, which are a council asset, and this proposal would require access to those fields. In terms of has this been done before, I think schools across the state open up their fields for community use. So in this instance, it would be the flow in the opposite direction of the school using a council facility or a community facility for playing fields. But in terms of the spaces within the school, there's a whole range of active and passive spaces that we're accommodating in our building design and within the school footprint. And there's been quite a bit of focus about not just how much space, but the quality of the space that we provide for the students. And
also the diversity of space, I suppose.
Absolutely. So, there's the school community is just like the broader community where there's a whole diverse range of interests and pastimes, and we've really spent a lot of time, and there's more time to spend in terms of creating different types of spaces for different types of students.
Great. Thanks very much, Matt. Look, Thomas, I'm going to ask you, there's a couple of questions that have come through in relation to parking and in particular staff parking, and I'll paraphrase them and get you to answer them all at once because I'm very conscious of time. What will staff parking look like, considering staff will be driving in from all over Sydney? And do you have a one-to-one ratio? Like, what will the ratios be for staff to accommodate staff parking?
That's a good question. Thank you. So yes, there is a basement car park underneath the school, which is, there is a section which is dedicated for the school use. It's not currently a 1-for-1 ratio. There's an acknowledgement from the department that some of their staff do come to the site in other ways, and it's another benefit of being integrated in the community and the location that we're offering, which is adjacent to the train station and as well as the bus interchange in front of the train station, and as well as a location like ours being in the centre of a community where it is really the centre of a walkable, permeable community. So there are multiple options of the ways that the staff and the students will make their way to the site. There is a car park underneath the building as well for the staff that do not want to travel in that way. But we're providing a car park in accordance with the requirements and the guidelines that schools have issued on how much they would like.
Great. Thanks very much, Thomas. A couple of questions comments that have come through regarding, the impacts on the road about, increased potential drop-offs. And I know you've answered that earlier on in relation to this being so close to the train station. But Thomas, I'd like you just to think for a minute about Henderson Lane and the management of Henderson Lane. And Tom, you might have to also step in and provide an answer here. But there are already this comment here is that there are already cars illegally parked on Sargent in that area. So on Sargent Street in the no stopping area. So how will you manage Henderson Lane in relation to illegal parking? There's been 3 or 4 questions that have come through in relation to illegal parking and in relation to Liverpool Council managing that. But have you thought about how you would actively manage that at this point in time?
I'll start, and then Tom, if you've got anything to add, feel free to jump in. I agree that there are some issues with monitoring around the site at present. I have been in dialogue with Liverpool City Council about that monitoring. Obviously, they went through a period during the pandemic where some of their resourcing was a little bit adjusted, and they have been struggling. I'm not speaking out of school here on behalf of Liverpool Council, but they have been adjusting to a change in their workload. So we have still been finalising the agreement with them whereby they will conduct the monitoring of the parking in both the town centre precinct as well as the surrounding residential precinct, because I think there were some queries about that as well. So all I can say is hopefully over the next few months you will notice a significant improvement in that enforcement activity surrounding the local area. Specifically with regard to Henderson Lane, that is still something that we need to consider with the specifics of the school. Just where we're at the moment in the status of the design, we haven't quite got into the detailed elements of how those types of things would be managed, but it's certainly something that we're looking at completing in the not too distant future.
Right. I think that was comprehensively answered. Thomas, I was asked one more follow-up question, and this is about Eat Street, and will Eat Street be able to accommodate the extra pedestrian traffic as a result of the school, because it's already struggling on busy days?
Yeah, look, I think it's a good problem to have from our perspective. We are obviously considering, or a part of our future works on the site includes the southwest quadrant and that extension to that public domain and that town square west area that you saw on the plans tonight. We will be introducing some additional retailers as part of the southwest quadrant, and so we believe that as well as introducing additional sort of demand, we'll also be introducing additional supply to help cater with that. But I do think there is room within the current existing Eat Street to cater for some additional demand as well.
Okay, thanks, Thomas. I'd like to bring to everyone's attention that it is 6:30. It's been a really lively session. A lot of comments, and we won't necessarily answer those comments, but there are a few questions left. We will have to wrap the session up at 6:40, but I'm very confident that we'll be able to get through all of the remaining questions. What I'll do is I'll clear of all of the comments. I'll clear them from the Q&A tool, but even if we haven't read them out loud, we have all of your comments, and your comments are just as important to us as your questions. Matt, one of the last handful of questions for you, and this is about conflict of use. It's something that hasn't actually come up, but the purpose of the local park, it's being advertised for residents, and now it could potentially be used by the students 5 days a week. So do you foresee a conflict in that use?
So the park is planned to become a council park, and the sorts of use that we're envisaging, it's not, correct me if I'm wrong, Tom, I don't think it's organised play. It's more, I think, passive recreation, and the school community would be part of the community like anyone else. So they'd be free to use a council asset, free to use a council park. So I don't think it was ever envisaged that park was just for residents. I think it's open to the broader community, and if this proposal were successful, the school would be an important part of that community.
Great, thanks, Matt. A very practical question for you, Thomas. If there's a fire alarm in the retail section, would it affect the whole school?
Yeah, I think that this has been an issue that obviously a lot of our community members have picked up on in the existing eastern portion of the site. That is to do with the fire engineering and the way that the current building has been structured. We are starting afresh with West, and it will be a standalone site to the existing eastern site. So we have the ability to plan for these things and to appropriately separate the different uses in the site to make sure that there's no impact upon school operations.
Great. Look, Matt, it may be too early in the planning process because you haven't even got your SSDA approved yet. But what amenities and stores and eateries are planned for the retail part of the proposal? Do you have them yet?
I think Thomas is probably the best place to answer that. He lives and breathes all things retail. So.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. I can talk to this. I think you're right, Callie. It's a little bit too early for us to be releasing information like that is still not really firm enough. We are obviously keenly watching the performance of the Eastern Mall and what retailers in there are working and paying attention to the feedback that we get from our community as well about what other uses they would like to see in the Western Precinct. We have started having a think about our leasing strategy and what sort of precincts and what uses we'd like to see over there. But obviously we will need to engage with the retailer market as well and confirm that there's interest from those uses as well. This is not a one-sided conversation. We obviously need buy-in from the retailers as well. They'd like to be at it. We would obviously love to have them. So it's just not at a stage yet where we're ready to release anything without any sort of certainty around what we can provide yet. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. It is very early. We've got quite a few years ahead of us. But these specific questions are probably for you as well, Thomas. The gas line issues and evacuations in Ed.Square, could you see that they will have an impact on the school? That's the first question. And then, or actually, if you can answer that question, then I'll ask you about McDonald Road.
Yeah, I think I touched on this before. The development of Town Centre West would be a separate system to the existing provision in Town Centre East. So there should be no impact from the eastern portion of the development, and we can appropriately plan Town Centre West to separate the uses so that there is no impact from any of the other uses within Town Centre West on the school operation.
Great. And look, on McDonald Road, will it eventually go north to connect with the newly opened Buchan Avenue? Is this within your town centre planning, or is this a question you need to take on notice? So the question is, on McDonald Road, are you saying it will eventually go north to connect with the newly opened Buchan Avenue, or somehow west to connect to a planned outlet through the hills to Denham Court?
No, so the current plan, and it's not us delivering it, so I'm just going off what the master plan is. It does, yes, it heads north. The existing connection over the railway line is there, but then it continues. It turns to the east and connects through, I think it's called Buchan Avenue at that point, but it's the extension of Soldiers Parade further up to the north. So it connects further up to the north of our site.
Great. One final question for you, Matt, and I've saved it to last because it's not directly related to the topic of tonight, but very important, as this participant has said. What's currently planned for the southern section of Town Centre West? Obviously, if the development is well integrated and ties in with the surrounding development, it would make it more successful for the community. So do you have any plans for the southern section of Town Centre West yet?
I think that's what Thomas was talking about earlier, wasn't it, in terms of the retail, us not really knowing. We know what we'd like, and that's a continuation of the east essentially.
I think just to help you out a little bit there, I think what we can say is we're looking at roughly 10,000 square meters of retail, and that would be delivered on the ground floor. I think the question also talks to sort of what else are we delivering as part of that. And so obviously we are looking to deliver some more residential apartments above the retail in that southwest quadrant.
Great, thank you. And Danny, the last question is for you. And I know you've answered this question earlier on, but I think that it's really relevant for us to end tonight's session on this. And that's the purpose of a high-rise school when you actually have some green space that's available. So what is the attraction for schools infrastructure to run this process, to look at a number of options to provide a high school in the area?
Yeah, it's a really good question, actually. And, the short answer is that we are considering both options, essentially. So hopefully the process through the business case to assess both options will tell us what we consider to be the best outcome for the community. But also, as I said earlier, it gives us the option to retain that site for future purposes as well. So we don't know what the future holds. It's obviously a growing community, so there may be an option for additional facilities in that area.
Great, thanks very much, Danny. And look, on the screen you can see the contact details. So if any of you have any further questions, please let us know. I'll just answer the last question that's there, which is about community members being able to have a voice and why it's coming from phrases. And the answer to this, this process is all about asking the community what your views are in relation to having a school located within Town Centre West. So thank you very much for all of your comments tonight, and please, as we've said earlier on, keep your views coming. This bottom-up approach, the top-down, bottom-up approach is all about asking the community, what do you think about this proposal? And we're taking everyone's feedback on board. As you can see up there, we've got a phone number and an email address and a website. I would just like to thank everyone for your time this evening. We have a drop-in session on Saturday where the team will be there. So if you think of any questions between now and then, come and see us at Ed.Square on Saturday morning. Thank you, team, for joining us. Thank you very much for all of your very thoughtful, very thought-provoking questions and comments. It was a very lively discussion. We have run 10 minutes over, but we were able to answer all the questions and for everyone to be able to see all of the comments that came through. And I would just like to reiterate that all of the comments that have come through on the chat, we will incorporate into the feedback as well. Thank you very much. We hope to meet some of you in person. Tell your neighbours, your friends about the session on Saturday, and we'll see you then. Thank you and good night.